About the author. Jennifer Weiner was born in Connecticut and received her bachelor's degree in English literature from Princeton University in 1991. She was a feature writer and columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer and worked as a newspaper reporter in central Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and Philadelphia. She is the author of the novels Good in Bed, 2001, In Her Shoes, 2002, which was made into a major motion picture starring Cameron Diaz, Toni Collette, and Shirley MacLaine, Little Earthquakes, 2004, Goodnight Nobody, 2005, The Guy Not Taken, 2006, Certain Girls, 2008, Best Friends Forever, 2009, Fly Away Home, 2010, Then Came You, 2011, The Next Best Thing, 2012, All Fall Down, 2014, and Who Do You Love, 2015. She has also written 2 middle-grade novels, The Littlest Bigfoot, 2016, and Little Bigfoot, Big City, 2017, as well as the nonfiction book Hungry Heart, Adventures in Life, Love, and Writing, 2016. Mrs. Everything, 2019, her most recent novel, received both critical acclaim and reader acclaim. Her work has appeared in a variety of publications, including 17, Red Book, Glamour, Cosmopolitan, Elle, Allure, Ladies' Home Journal, Time, and Good Housekeeping. Jennifer can be found on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as in her hometown of Philadelphia, where she lives with her family. Overview. Big Summer is a modern novel that is part murder mystery, part Bildungsroman, or a coming-of-age story. It follows Daphne, the narrator, as she learns to truly love her plus-sized body. The reader is immersed in Daphne's experience as she deals with shame, low self-esteem, and the shocking murder of her former friend, the lovely Drew Kavanaugh. Big Summer criticizes social media's negative effects, the destructive nature of body norms, and the judgment of others, in a world where in-person connections are avoided in favor of online relationships. Weiner uses plot twists to create tension, propel momentum, and question the characters' intentions in 3 parts. Please keep in mind that this study guide discusses potentially triggering topics such as body shaming, emotional abuse, and sexist language. Plot. Daphne is a social media influencer and part-time nanny. Her blog and Instagram account advocate for body positivity and plus-size fashion. Despite her outward confidence, Daphne suffers from low self-esteem. She longs to be loved and respected for her heart and talent, but she is constantly let down by men who can't get past her weight. Her childhood friendship with a woman named Drew is also haunting her. Drew Kavanaugh is the heir to a family fortune in Manhattan. She embodies every stereotype of American beauty, and her wealth and family name enable her to view the world as her playground. She employs girls who adore her to do the work she would rather not do. Drew, on the other hand, is lonely and receives little love and support from her family. Her father, Robert, is well known for his Cape Cod summer affairs, which result in children that Drew never meets. Drew and Daphne first meet in 6th grade, when Daphne's parents assist her in obtaining a scholarship to the prestigious Lathrop School. Despite her friend Darcy's warnings, Daphne falls under Drew's spell right away. Daphne and Drew have been using each other in an envious friendship for years. Daphne is eager to please Drew because being with Drew makes her feel special. Drew manipulates Daphne while also envying her home life. Their friendship is shattered when the girls go out at the age of 19, and Drew sets Daphne up with a handsome and wealthy friend. Daphne learns that Drew arranges the date because she feels sorry for Daphne, and that the man is uninterested in her. Daphne stops speaking to Drew, and they don't speak for years. Drew, on the other hand, develops a social media career. Drew's fortune and connections allow her to launch an influencer career, whereas Daphne's social media career is limited to body positivity subcultures. Daphne eventually moves in with Darcy, and spends her 20s learning to love her body. Daphne is in a good place when Drew reappears in her life. Daphne, a plus-size model, was recently hired by Leela, a fashion designer. Drew locates Daphne and invites her to be her maid of honor at her wedding. Drew is well-known and wealthy, but she has few friends. Daphne agrees to attend the wedding despite her past traumas and Darcy's warnings when Drew offers her money. Photo opportunities at Drew's wedding will almost certainly increase exposure for Leela's fashion brand. Drew and Daphne reach an agreement, and Daphne travels to Cape Cod for the year's socialite wedding. The night before the wedding, the Kavanaghs throw an extravagant party. Daphne strikes up a conversation with a handsome man named Nick, who claims to have known Drew as a child at sailing camp, which seems out of place at such a fancy event. Daphne overhears Drew and her father arguing about money, and she comforts Drew after the party. Daphne encounters a man who lurks around the rooms and quickly disappears on her way out of Drew's room. Daphne spends the night with Nick and awakens to find Drew dead in the hot tub attached to Daphne's room. Nick isn't to be found. Detective McMichaels questions Daphne. He reveals that the wedding was meticulously planned, with companies advertising their products on Drew and her groom's social media platforms. Darcy travels to Cape Cod from a scientific conference in Boston to assist Daphne. Emma Vincent, a caterer, is arrested by Detective McMichaels for the murder of Drew Kavanaugh. Darcy and Daphne discover Nick in another room. He denies murdering Drew and claims he left early in the morning because he was afraid someone would find him and realize he hadn't been invited to the wedding. Nick grew up in the house that had been rented for the wedding. Nick's mother had owned the house but had been murdered when he was a child. Nick was adopted by his aunt and her husband, and when he learned that Drew's wedding would be held nearby, he decided to crash so he could return to his childhood home. Daphne, Darcy, and Nick locate Emma's mother, who quickly recognizes Nick. She explains that Emma and Nick are both the children of Robert Kavanaugh. Both of their mothers had brief relationships with Robert many years ago. Drew's mother, Lily, is hospitalized due to a nervous breakdown. Daphne visits her. She overhears a conversation between Stuart and a woman he proposed to on a dating show on which he had appeared. When Daphne confronts him, Stuart admits that the wedding was a setup. Drew needed to marry to receive her trust fund sooner, so she and Stuart agreed to marry for the money and the publicity. The plan had been to have a wedding that would have garnered them even more attention, followed by a divorce a few years later. Emma is eventually freed after the cause of death is determined to be poison. Daphne notices the mysterious man from the deck at the Lathrop School's Drew Memorial, but is stopped by Detective McMichaels before she can speak to him. Detective McMichaels is on the hunt for Drew's murderer. He reveals that Drew's death would have benefited many people, including Daphne. Drew had changed her will 6 months before her wedding to leave her millions to charity, Daphne, and all of Robert's children, including those born out of wedlock. Daphne is determined to find Drew's murderer now that suspicion has been recast on her. On Drew's social media, Daphne, Darcy, and Nick discover the mystery man from the deck. Aditya is a data scientist whose physical appearance and lack of wealth make him unsuitable as a boyfriend for Drew. They go to Connecticut to confront him. Aditya is a nice man who admits that he and Drew were in love. When Drew met Aditya, she had been working hard to give back to the community, and she fell in love with him partly because she knew he didn't like her solely for her family's money. Drew eventually ended her relationship with Aditya because she succumbed to the pressure to marry someone like Stuart. Aditya suggests that someone who had been wronged by Drew might have murdered her. Daphne looks through old photographs of Drew's life, hoping to find someone who despised Drew enough to murder her. Daphne realizes that Leela is a girl from Drew's high school who took the SATs for Drew and was expelled. After tracking Daphne's movements on social media, Leela confronts her in her apartment. Leela admits that she hired a man to poison Drew. Leela's life had been shattered by her expulsion. Her family had stopped communicating with her, all of her college acceptances had been withdrawn, and Leela had even spent time in a psychiatric ward. Leela changed her appearance and life to become a sophisticated and trendy fashion designer, which would provide her with the connections and resources she needed to get close to Drew. She even hired Daphne, even though Daphne and Drew were once friends. Leela reveals her plan to murder Daphne and stage her death as a suicide. Daphne fights back, and Nick arrives just in time to protect her. Leela has been charged with Drew's murder. Daphne takes pride in her body, the body that allowed her to fight for her life. She and Nick fall in love and begin to make plans for their future together. Daphne reconciles her feelings toward Drew, whom she now sees as a lonely woman who died without being truly known by anyone except Aditya. Prologue. Christina visits her father's summer cottage on Cape Cod in 1994. Christina's father is disappointed by her unexpected pregnancy, but agrees to let her stay in the cottage with her new baby Aiden. Aiden's father is already married and no longer has any relationship with Christina or Aiden. Christina is relieved to be away from her life in New York City, cut off from the rest of the world by Aiden. Chapter 1. The year is now 2018. Daphne, the narrator, meets Leela, a freelance designer. Daphne is the owner of a popular fashion blog. She is always on the lookout for clothing that makes her feel beautiful, as a plus-size woman. Leela hires her as the face of Leaf Fashion, a new plus-size line. Leela had found Daphne on social media after she spoke out against gym culture's fat-shaming ethos. Leela finds Daphne relatable, but Daphne is aware that her internet persona is carefully crafted. Daphne agrees to wear Leela's clothes to the wedding of her old high school friend, Drew Kavanaugh, on the Cape. Chapter 2. Daphne goes to a bar with Drew and some other friends when she is 19, and they run into a group of Drew's male friends. One of the young men, Lake, appears to be interested in Daphne, who is not used to male attention. Daphne is encouraged to flirt with Lake by Drew. Daphne then overhears a conversation between Drew and Lake, in which Drew refers to Daphne as a grenade, an ugly girl who needs to be wooed for other men to get to the prettier girls. Daphne is ashamed, but she stands up for herself. She slams her foot into Lake's toes again on the dance floor. While the rest of the dance floor is watching, he makes a crude and sexist remark to her, and a woman records the incident on her phone. Drew admits to the setup and tells Daphne that everyone feels sorry for her. Daphne is overweight and attended their private school on a scholarship, whereas Drew is wealthy and thin. Daphne storms away from Drew for the first time in their years of friendship, standing up for herself. Daphne admires her handiwork in her family's apartment. She's a talented designer and decorator who wishes others could recognize her abilities. Daphne searches for body acceptance and comes across several social media pages dedicated to body positivity. She decides to stop limiting her diet and lifestyle, and instead embrace her body. She also resolves to no longer be friends with Drew. The next morning, Daphne is baking breakfast when she receives a text from her friend Darshi asking if she is okay. Darshi shares a YouTube video titled "Fat Girl Goes Off," which shows Daphne calling out Lake on the dance floor. Some of the comments encourage her, while others label her fat. Daphne updates her social media page picture and title to "Big Time," along with a photo of herself raising her middle finger. Chapter 3. Daphne uploads a video of herself from that night outside the bar. It reflects how Daphne was humiliated by her friends, while also serving as the origin story of her influencer. Daphne works as an afternoon nanny for the Schnitzers. Daphne collects Ian and Izzy from school and looks after them for the afternoon. She has a special connection with Ian, who is bullied at school. Drew reappears in Daphne's life thanks to the Schnitzers. Drew has become a social media businesswoman and has achieved some minor celebrity. Daphne has learned about her engagement to Stuart Lowe through gossip magazines. Stuart had appeared on a popular dating show. Drew inquires about Darshi, who now resides with Daphne. Drew admits to not having enough friends for her wedding party. Despite coming from a wealthy family, Drew is lonely amid the family dramas and phony friends that surround her. Daphne pities her, but is hesitant to forgive her. Drew offers to pay Daphne to be a bridesmaid at her wedding. Drew posts a picture of them on Instagram when Daphne finally agrees, and Daphne gains 2,000 new followers that night. Chapter 4. Daphne had gone to the prestigious Lathrop School, where her father was an English teacher. She started in 6th grade because she had to wait a few years before receiving financial aid. She met Drew on her first day of school, when she was invited to sit next to her in class. Drew approached Daphne in the lunch line and asked for money, which Daphne gladly gave up, eager for a friend. Darshi scoffed at Drew as she stood next to her in line. She explained to Daphne that Drew's mother's family had founded the school and didn't require lunch money. Daphne declined Drew's invitation to lunch in favor of Darshi's friends. Drew and her friends Avery and Ainsley defied social convention by sitting at Darshi's table. Daphne couldn't help but fall under Drew's charismatic spell, despite Darshi's early warnings that Drew would only use and abuse her. Chapter 5. Darshi and Daphne share their home with Bingo, a terrier pug that Daphne adopted after the night at the club and the humiliating YouTube video. Darshi is completing her doctorate at Columbia University and is dating a woman of which her parents are unaware. Daphne is hesitant to tell Darshi about her reunion with Drew. Darshi had proven to be a true friend in middle school. Both girls were intelligent but unpopular. Despite knowing that Darshi was her ally, Daphne continued to run errands for Drew to gain her favor. Drew's allure moved Daphne, but she also knew that Drew didn't have the same loving home life that Daphne did. When Daphne's father took Drew on an excursion around the city to try exotic foods, Drew stated emphatically that it was the best day of her life. Darshi finally learns about Drew's wedding from Daphne. Darshi, enraged, tells Daphne not to count on her picking up the pieces again. But because Daphne is unique and self-assured, she is certain that she will not let Drew humiliate her again. Darshi questions Daphne about whether her toxic relationship with Drew was worth it. Daphne recalls gallivanting around New York with Drew and admits that it had been fun at times. Chapter 6. Daphne meets her brother Trip and other waspy family members at Drew's engagement party. Drew introduces Daphne to Karina Bailey, the woman Stewart proposed to on the dating show All the Single Ladies, before ditching her for Drew. Drew admits to Daphne privately that inviting Karina would be great fodder for gossip magazines. Minerva, Drew's facialist, and Natalie, her assistant, are also bridesmaids. Stewart attempts to introduce Daphne to his friend Brett, whom Daphne recognizes. She had met Brett on a dating app and had not concealed her size. They had communicated and connected, but when they finally met in person, he abruptly left her without explanation. The party is on a street that has changed dramatically since Daphne last visited. She recalls Weight Watchers meetings in the church basement, which remind her of her grandmother. Nana would visit Daphne in New York as a child when her parents worked at summer camps. Nana had been the first to teach Daphne that there was something wrong with being big. She forced Daphne to exercise and slowly nibble and suck on diet food. Daphne would go to bed hungry, repeating her grandmother's lessons about eating less as a form of self-control. Nana had brought Daphne to Weight Watchers, where she was captivated by the women who supported each other on their weight loss journeys, despite her confusion about her relationship with her body. Daphne's parents were surprised to see her weight loss when they returned home from their summer camp jobs. Her parents had always encouraged her to be happy and healthy, rather than obsessed with her appearance. Despite her parents' efforts to repair the psychological damage caused by Nana, Daphne had already internalized fat phobia. Chapter 7. In June, Daphne will arrive on Cape Cod. Drew has arranged for Daphne to stay in a 4-star hotel. Drew has planned an event-packed week leading up to her wedding, and Daphne can't help but think about how much this wedding must be costing the Kavanaghs, whose business, rumor has it, has been suffering. Leela, Daphne's new boss, texts her about the wedding. Leela wants Daphne's photo with Leela's dress in Vogue, which is rumored to be covering the wedding. Daphne takes in the view of the Cape and thinks that this would be an ideal place to fall in love. Chapter 8. Drew throws a beach party that is funded by social media brands. At the bar, Daphne meets a handsome man named Nick Andros. Nick is Drew's childhood friend whom she met at the sailing camp. He recalls Drew putting him in closets with her friends. Nick is a native of Massachusetts who works as a yoga instructor in Boston for at-risk elementary school students. He reveals that Daphne is staying in a house owned by the Weinberg family, who generously paid to rent the space for the wedding party. Daphne and Nick become acquainted, and she finds his humbler upbringing refreshing. Drew and her father argue about the money he's spending on the wedding near the end of the night. Chapter 9. Daphne brings Drew, who is crying alone in her room, a glass of water. Drew claims that her parents are divorcing, and that her wedding is her mother's last chance to recoup financial losses from Drew's father. Drew rejects Daphne's efforts to seduce Stuart. Daphne is leading Drew through the deck when she is surprised by a young man who resembles Nick. He inquires about Drew's well-being and introduces himself as a Mr. Kavanaugh employee. He abruptly ends their conversation, leaving Daphne to wonder about his feelings for Drew. She finds Nick waiting for her with a drink on the deck of her room. She and Nick relax in the hot tub in her room. Nick admits to seeing Stuart with another woman on the beach. Daphne deduces from his description that the woman was Karina. She wonders if she should tell Drew, but she is concerned that Drew will dismiss the warning. Nick speculates that Drew knows Stuart and has an arrangement with him. In the hot tub, Nick and Daphne kiss. Daphne decides to let go of her inhibitions, and they have sex. Nick spends the night with her, and they have 2 more sex sessions. Later, she becomes suddenly aware that he has vanished. Daphne searches her deck for Nick and discovers Drew face down in the hot tub. She tries to pull Drew out of the water and performs CPR on her while yelling for help. She has a feeling Drew is no longer alive. Prologue and Chapters 1 to 9 Analysis. Part 1 of Big Summer delves into the double-edged swords of social media, friendship, beauty standards, and a dieting culture. Daphne and Drew are both Instagram influencers. Drew's social media presence has far more followers than Daphne's, but Daphne has successfully created a niche audience account. Furthermore, Daphne's social media presence grew through hard work and practical online skills, whereas Drew has the money and socialite connections to launch her influencer career. Daphne gains a strong sense of self-worth as a result of her influence. She is openly plus-size online and uses her platforms to promote body positivity. While this is rewarding, Daphne knows from personal experience that social media is unauthentic. Daphne's photos are flawlessly modeled and edited. Even her quotable anecdotes and feel-good messages are staged. But Daphne understands the positive power of inauthenticity. When Daphne was full of self-hatred, pages like the one she now runs taught her that she was not alone, and that there is power and beauty in being yourself. As a result, there is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, social media connects lonely people. On the other hand, it increases the pressure to look and present yourself in a certain manner. Furthermore, social media is not as fair as it appears. In today's society, social media has become a platform for success. In fact, without a social media presence, it would be difficult to become a successful author, designer, actor, model, or businessperson. In some ways, this allows people with few real-world connections to benefit from social media. At the same time, if you have money, like Drew, social media is a whole new world to explore. Despite her family's wealth, Drew receives several sponsors and career opportunities via Instagram, giving her access to funds that Daphne does not have. Drew's Instagram account is wildly successful because she embodies beauty norms, whereas Daphne's is successful within a subculture. Instagram's fabrication equalizes the women in one way: they both know what it's like to pretend their way to the top. Daphne unintentionally prepared herself for her version of identity fabrication by following Drew and dreaming of becoming her. The beauty standards of society create tension in these chapters. The pressures to conform to rigid and unchanging standards have weighed heavily on Daphne's psyche. The character seems to take a backseat to being thin, beautiful, and stylish. This is exemplified by Drew. She embodies American beauty standards, but she is frequently cruel and petty. Daphne may not embody society's beauty ideals as well as Drew, but she is kind, humble, and intelligent. It is common knowledge that beauty standards are promoted in part to sell products that promise to make a woman feel worthy of love and attention. Daphne hopes to normalize and beautify plus-size women by collaborating with a plus-size fashion brand. However, this emphasis on the superficial hurts the novel's characters. While Drew is the epitome of American beauty, she is unhappy and unable to connect with others. Daphne may be creating her version of beauty, but she is constantly concerned about her weight and how others perceive her. As a result, the two central characters, two women who are juxtaposed with one another, are both dissatisfied with and victimized by beauty standards. Another major theme is socioeconomic conflict. Daphne was raised by schoolteachers who adored her but were financially strapped. Drew was raised by a wealthy family who constantly fought and mostly ignored her. So while Daphne is self-conscious about her lack of money in the presence of Drew and her friends, it is Daphne who is rich in love and support. Drew uses her family's money to assert her superiority over others, but her and her father's argument over her lavish wedding suggests a disparity between how much money there is and how much money the Kavanaghs want to prove they have. Daphne has had to work very hard to make a living. She understands the value of treasured possessions and people. However, her relative poverty in the context of her private school experience was traumatic. It separated her from the majority of her peers, giving them a reason to tease and ostracize her. Weiner's point is to demonstrate that money does not make people happy or good. This is a story about two women and their teetering friendship. Drew serves as a foil to Daphne, emphasizing her strength and compassion. Weiner uses this toxic friendship to pose a question to the reader: what constitutes a friendship? Drew has a history of being unkind to Daphne, so why does she return to her? Drew and Daphne are linked by genuine childhood memories, such as when Daphne's father took Drew on a trip to the exotic food world of New York City. Daphne gave Drew a genuine friend and a caring family. Drew did make Daphne feel seen at times. Furthermore, Daphne was given much more intimate access to Drew's home life than Drew's other wealthy friends. Drew doesn't have to keep up appearances with Daphne. Daphne feels compassion for Drew, who is even more lonely than Daphne. Although Daphne is motivated to be Drew's maid of honor for the money and social media exposure, it is clear that Daphne cares for Drew despite Drew's cruelty. Daphne allows Drew to be cruel to her because it confirms Daphne's worst self-image. Drew and Daphne's friendship is more of a negotiated relationship, in which both parties gain something tangible from their collaboration. This is in stark contrast to Daphne's genuine friendship with Darcy. Darcy is intelligent, loyal, and genuinely nice. Why does Daphne still pine for Drew when she has friends like Darcy? Weiner foreshadows that Daphne and Drew will never have a friendship based on mutual love and respect, until Daphne can truly love herself. Daphne has a difficult time finding men who reciprocate her feelings. Many of the men Daphne dates are not comfortable with her weight. Daphne, on the other hand, enters relationships reeking of her shame. When she meets Nick, she is at ease enough in the foreign setting of the wedding to give herself some leeway. If Nick isn't nice to her, she'll be able to abandon him. But Nick has an instant attraction to Daphne. Daphne feels more confident seizing her joy in the context of Drew's wedding, which is beautiful on the outside but miserable on the inside. Unlike Daphne, Drew's love priorities are based on financial and social capital. Even if the relationship isn't based on true love, Stewart can provide her with a level of celebrity that gives her bragging rights. Daphne understands the importance of self-love, but she is still influenced by how others treat her. Daphne's destructive relationship with Nana emphasizes this. Nana teaches Daphne to despise her body and supports her eating disorder and body dysmorphia. Even as Daphne grows older, she finds it difficult to dismiss Nana. Their history demonstrates how easily our surroundings can permanently scar us. As a result, Daphne must surround herself with people who lift her, such as Nick and Darcy, rather than people who bring her down, such as Drew and Nana. Part 1 concludes with a plot twist by Weiner. Daphne believes Drew died from drowning in the hot tub. Surprisingly, an author would kill off one of their main characters so quickly, but the suspense and tension serve to keep the reader interested. The plot twist reveals a darker side to Drew's seemingly perfect life. Another mystery is still unsolved. The prologue depicts a woman who, as a single mother, gives birth to a son and flees to Cape Cod. This lays the groundwork for what we will learn about Drew's father, who has had children outside of marriage. Christina is Nick's mother, as the reader will discover. Chapter 10. Ryan McMichaels is a Truro Police Department detective. He's trying to piece together the events leading up to Drew's death. Daphne recalls the previous night, when Mr. Kavanaugh argued with Drew, and Daphne discovered Drew sad and alone in her room. She mentions the stranger she met on the dock outside Drew's hotel room, who hadn't said anything other than he worked for Mr. Kavanaugh. Detective McMichaels inquires about the wedding pitch deck, which is intended to entice sponsors and advertisers to pay for the event. Daphne hadn't given it much thought. She flips through it with the detective and notices an ad featuring Leela's outfit and Daphne, whom Drew dubbed a plus-size influencer. Daphne tells the detective how profitable Drew's social media presence could be if she could sell her wedding to sponsors. Detective McMichaels reveals that he checked the wedding guest list and found that Nick Andros was not on it. He shows Daphne a Google search for Nick Andros, a character from a Stephen King novel. Chapter 11. Leela calls Daphne to tell her about the photos she took the night before. Leela offers to send her address for the funeral photos when Daphne informs her of Drew's death. Daphne contacts her parents, who then contact Darcy, who encourages her to locate Nick Andros. Darcy had joked the night before about murdering Drew if she hurt Daphne. Both women are concerned about the police discovering these texts. Even though Drew's death has been widely publicized, no one knows what caused her death. Chapter 12. Daphne starts looking for Nick's identity. She calls the sailing club and searches online for yoga instructors in Boston, but to no avail. Daphne overhears Drew's grandmother and an aunt discussing Drew's recently signed will. Stuart will not receive the entirety of Drew's trust fund funds. When Daphne learns that Drew's will stipulated that half of his money would go to a high school friend, she becomes concerned that she will be implicated if she is the high school friend who stands to benefit from Drew's death. Stuart's sister Arden Lowe approaches Daphne for a conversation. Arden informs Daphne about Stuart's relationship with Drew, which everyone assumed began in college. Arden reveals that after graduating from the Lathrop School, Drew spent an extra year at a boarding school in California where she met Stuart for the first time. She had dumped Stuart for the son of a tech titan, then dumped him again when she started dating him again in college for the son of another wealthy man. Arden is surprised to learn about the pitch deck because he assumed Drew's family was wealthy enough to fund the wedding without the need for advertisement deals. Darcy appears out of nowhere. Chapter 13. Darcy and Daphne visit Nick's ostensible sailing club, Provincetown Yacht Club. They approach the owner, an older woman who is suspicious of their inquiries about Drew. Nick's boat, the Lady Lou, is mentioned by Daphne. She confirms that a Dan Brannigan is on board that ship, but he is currently out of reach. Dora, the woman, tells Daphne to look around the docks for Dan to see if he's the same man as Nick. Dora suggests looking for the traffic cop dressed as a pilgrim. In town, Daphne suddenly connects the dots and discovers where Nick is. They return to the Weinbergs' home and discover Nick hiding in an empty salon room connected to Daphne's bedroom. Nick's belongings are fully stocked in the salon room. He admits that he used to live in the house as a child, and he sneaked into the wedding reception to visit his childhood home. He introduces himself as Nick Carvalho again, but Darcy searches for the previous owners of the house and finds Aidan Killian. When the Carvalho family adopted him after his mother was murdered, he changed his name to Nick. Daphne recalls Drew telling her about the murder when they were younger. The woman's body was discovered with her son curled up around her. The murder was even the subject of a Lifetime movie. The assailant was a random gutter cleaner with no connection to Aidan's mother. Aidan had lied about his name because he didn't want the other guests to find out about his new identity. Aidan had explored the house while Daphne was sleeping and overheard a heated conversation between Drew's father and a younger woman. Aidan almost got caught snooping and fled. He had returned to the house to retrieve his belongings when he learned of Drew's death. Detective McMichaels exits the house with other officers and a handcuffed and pleading young woman. Daphne comes across Arden, who informs her that a caterer has been arrested. The caterer had Drew pictures as well as a gun. Nick reveals that he recognizes Arden's voice. She is the one he heard the night before conspiring with Drew's father. Chapters 10 to 13 Analysis. Part 2 begins with a significant plot twist. Drew is indeed dead, and with her, the chance to rekindle Drew and Daphne's friendship has passed. Drew was originally intended to be one of the two main characters, the foil for Daphne's character development. Daphne, in contrast to Drew, was self-conscious and ashamed. She was eager to demonstrate that she was stronger than Drew's seductive influence. Daphne has lost her foil now that Drew is no longer alive. Weiner speculates, will Daphne be able to stand on her own and fully develop into her authentic self without Drew to hold her up against? Weiner uses short chapters full of plot twists to increase tension in Part 2. Drew's death is quickly followed by the discovery that Nick Andros is not who he claims to be. When the detective reveals that Nick Andros is not on the wedding guest list, Weiner leads her reader to believe that Nick is guilty of lying to Daphne. However, Weiner quickly undermines this. Nick Andros lied about his last name but not his life or first name. Nick's attachment to the Weinberg house and his desire to revisit the rooms becomes a touching backstory rather than a motive for murder. It's unclear what this means for Nick and Daphne's relationship. Daphne is concerned that Nick used her to gain access to the house, reinforcing her feelings of shame and inferiority. Despite Nick's insistence that he truly liked and connected with Daphne, the noticeable increase in tension foreshadows conflict between Daphne and Nick. Darcy's sanity balances Daphne's attraction to Nick and her willingness to believe his story. The veracity of Nick's life and the story remains in question. These chapters reveal even more of social media's negative consequences. Leela suggests to Daphne that she wear one of Leela's dresses to Drew's funeral, where there will undoubtedly be many photographers. Leela demonstrates how little people truly care for one another in the context of social media by turning Drew's funeral into a fashion event and bringing up her dress. People are estranged from one another in the world of social media. They are given a supposedly intimate, but very fabricated, vision of the lives of others. People are unable to connect on an emphatic level. Leela exemplifies this by viewing a funeral as a photo opportunity. Part 2 drastically changes the tone of the novel. Part 1 establishes the novel as a story about friendship and self-love, while Part 2 shifts to a murder mystery. The caterer's arrest appears unsatisfactory. Weiner has planted enough hints to suggest that something is seriously wrong with Drew's death, including a hint that Mr. Kavanaugh and Stuart's sister are somehow involved. Part 2 is titled The Summer Friend. This is how society refers to married people's affairs, like Mr. Kavanagh's summer friends. This portrays extramarital affairs as casual and flip. Mr. Kavanaugh has had enough affairs to raise suspicions about his secret conversations with Arden. The suspicions about Mr. Kavanaugh and Arden, on the other hand, are dubious because they come from Nick, who has lied so far. Daphne and Darcy must first believe in Nick before they can believe that Arden and Drew's father is up to something. Part 2 concludes with more questions than answers, and a tone that foreshadows additional conflict and mystery. Chapter 14. Darcy remains suspicious of Nick, whom she suspects of harboring resentment for how the police and media handled his mother's murder. Darcy is taken aback by the coincidence of Nick checking in with his former home on the same night Drew dies. Mr. Kavanaugh has gone missing, and Drew's mother is in the hospital for a nervous breakdown. Meanwhile, Nick suspects Darcy, who arrived from Boston shortly after learning of Drew's death and readily admits to disliking Drew. Chapter 15. Daphne meets with Rabbi Howard Medloff to provide him with information about Drew for his eulogy. She tries to present the rabbi with a sparkling and complimentary image of Drew. She wonders if Drew was in pain when she died. Chapter 16. Daphne walks in on Stuart and Karina holding hands at the hospital where Drew's mother is being treated. Karina admits that she has always been with Stuart. Stuart reveals that Drew was desperate for her trust fund money and needed to marry to get it sooner. Stuart and Drew had secretly married 6 months before for Drew to get the money, and then Drew planned an elaborate ad-funded wedding for the social clout and financial benefits. They intended to stage a wedding in which Stuart abandons Drew at the altar for Karina, giving all three of them a reason to make headlines and land lucrative advertising deals. Drew had also been secretly seeing someone on the side. Stuart and Drew's wedding and the relationship had been staged for fame and money. Lily, Drew's mother, enters the room and faints. Chapter 17. Daphne, Darcy, and Nick provide comfort to Lily. They tell her about Emma Vincent, the caterer charged with Drew's murder. Emma Vincent is Mr. Kavanaugh's daughter, according to Lily. Chapter 18. Emma's family is tracked down by Daphne, Darcy, and Nick. They meet her mother, who is taken aback by Nick's appearance. She reveals that Nick's father is Robert Kavanaugh. Mrs. Vincent tells them how Robert seduced her when she was young. Her pregnancy was unintentional, and she didn't realize Robert wouldn't leave his wife for her until she met Nick's mother Christina in the local grocery store. Mrs. Vincent and Christina became friends, and Nick spent a lot of time as a child with his half-sister Emma. Robert may have dozed off, but he did assist his children. He would stop by now and then, and he has now hired an attorney to represent Emma. Emma had never met Drew before. She had scoured the internet for Drew, desperate for a closer relationship with her absent father. Mrs. Vincent explains Emma's gun as a legally required safety precaution. Daphne comes across photos of Emma and Robert, smiling and happy in ways she hasn't seen with Robert and Drew. Chapter 19. Emma is released days after Drew's death, after police determine that Drew died as a result of poisoning. Daphne attends Drew's memorial service at Lathrop High School. Nick unexpectedly attends, and when Daphne delivers her speech, Lily screams. The memorial concludes quickly, and Daphne runs into the man she met outside Drew's room on the deck on her way out. Detective McMichaels intercepts her before she can get his attention. He informs her that Daphne died as a result of cyanide poisoning, a poison drink that killed her quickly and inexorably. He's looking for more suspects now that Emma has been cleared. Daphne was named in Drew's will, as were all of Robert Kavanaugh's biological children. Detective McMichaels puts the heat on Daphne after learning of Nick's paternity and Drew's death just 6 months after establishing her new will. Chapter 20. Darcy and Nick are kept up to date by Daphne. They agree to meet later to talk about it, and while walking with Nick, he and Daphne argue about social media. Daphne's job is online, but Nick is concerned about how technology affects the formation of relationships. As a child, he had looked up information about his mother on the internet and read numerous cruel comments about her being a slut who deserved what she got. Daphne acknowledges the pain that social media can cause, but she sees it as bringing together a community that empowers marginalized voices. She takes Nick to her parents' apartment, where they speculate on who might have killed Drew. Darcy has joined them. Daphne's mother speculates that Abigail, the Kavanaugh housekeeper, was an enraged victim of Drew's cruelty. Daphne contacts Abigail, and the two agree to meet at a cafe. Abigail describes meeting one of Drew's boyfriends, a dark-skinned chef. The man appears to fit the description of the Dex mystery man. Chapter 21. Daphne, Nick, and Darcy comb through Drew's social media followers in search of the mystery man. Aditya Acharya, Daphne recognizes him from a photograph. The man is older and chubbier than anyone would expect Drew to fall in love with. They discover his New Haven address. Chapter 22. On the way to New Haven, they go over Aditya's profile. He is an educated data scientist from New Jersey who appears to enjoy dogs. They locate his address, and Aditya greets them inside. He tells Daphne that he recognizes her from the videos and photos Drew showed him. he reveals that Drew was proud of Daphne. Aditya tells them how he met Drew while tutoring high school students in Boston. She liked how Aditya wasn't impressed by her wealth or social standing. Aditya had always suspected that Drew was torn between her feelings for him and her family's desire for her to marry well. Aditya crashed the wedding party to check on Drew after she broke up with him for Stuart. He speculates that whoever killed Drew could have been someone Drew used and hurt without realizing it, such as the girl who took her SATs for her and was expelled. Chapter 23. Darcy suggests that they halt their search for Drew's killer on the way back to New York. There were far too many gaps, and Drew had reaped the consequences of her poor treatment of others. Daphne exits the car ahead of her parents' apartment, allowing her to walk alone and think. A sudden realization grips Daphne. She discovers an old photograph of Drew's Croft School graduating class. She notices a woman named Kamin Charwin Thamawat among the group. Kamin transformed herself over time, losing weight and undergoing cosmetic surgery until she became Leela Thakun. Daphne edits the photo to encircle Kamin and sends a message to Nick and Detective McMichaels speculating that Kamin is Drew's murderer. Daphne returns to her apartment, where Leela, gun drawn, awaits her. Leela realized Daphne was after her when she posted from Connecticut, where Aditya lives. Leela intends to murder Daphne and stage her death as a suicide. Leela admits to paying a man to poison Drew. She tells Daphne that her resentment of Drew stems from more than just being expelled. Drew represented everything Leela's immigrant family wanted for Leela, but Leela knew that with Drew in the world, she would never be able to achieve her dreams. Leela had been expelled from Croft, and all of her college acceptances had been revoked by Drew's family's lawyers. Leela had spent time in a mental hospital, away from her family. For years, she had meticulously planned her vengeance, changing her appearance and developing a fashion brand, and tracking down Daphne to hire as a plus-size model. Daphne uses a knife to attack Leela. Nick, who was concerned when Daphne didn't answer her phone, interrupts their fight. Leela collapses on the ground, and Nick consoles Daphne while they await the police. Daphne gives the police and Detective McMichaels her statement. Nick spends the night with her, and they fantasize about going to New York or Cape Cod together. Daphne stays awake after they have sex, thinking about Drew and Leela. She returns to a message from a young girl who asks how she can be more confident. Daphne tells the girl that it's important to show people the real her, not the Instagram version of herself, and that everyone is struggling. Finally, Daphne realizes that her size contributed to her victory over Leela. She expresses gratitude to her thighs and discovers self-love. Her most vivid memory of Drew is from the day Daphne's father took her on a food tour. "This was the happiest day of my life," Drew had said. Chapters 14 to 23 Analysis. When Daphne discovers the truth about Stuart and Drew's relationship, she realizes how deceptive people are willing to be to succeed. Stuart and Drew struck a deal that would bring them fame, notoriety, and money. They take advantage of one another. Ironically, Daphne is surprised. Drew had frequently relied on Daphne for errands and later, social media clout. Similarly, Daphne used Drew to gain wealth and confidence. Many relationships in this novel are built on the use of others. Daphne's mistrust of her newfound friendship with Nick is another example. She is constantly questioning whether Nick truly wants to get to know her, or if he is only interested in her because she is close to the Kavanaugh family. Daphne's natural skepticism about whether people like her for her true self demonstrates how easily people can be manipulated. It also emphasizes how easily people can become accustomed to being used. For Daphne, it would not be surprising if Nick was indeed using her because she has come to accept it as normal. Weiner encourages her readers to seek out people who uplift and respect them, rather than exploit and abuse them. The Kavanaugh family is full of lies and secrets. They appear to be the ideal WASP family. They are wealthy, have a well-established socialite identity, and have founded schools and charitable organizations. They spend their money to maintain their perfect image. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. In reality, the Kavanaghs are marked by instability and infidelity. Robert's affairs are an unspoken but well-known secret, as are the children he has had outside of marriage. Even Drew knows that there are children, but she has no idea who they are. Weiner's messages about inauthenticity are emphasized by this dichotomy of public persona versus private reality. Though many people, including Daphne, are envious of the Kavanaghs are unhappy and constantly under pressure to maintain false appearances. They are far from the model citizens that Manhattan society expects of them. This lack of authenticity leads to Drew's death. Drew learns from her parents how to put others down to make herself look better, and this hurts Leela so much that she murders her. Drew could have avoided being killed if she had been raised to accept responsibility for herself and to appreciate others with humility. Weiner demonstrates how common it is to believe that the grass is greener on the other side. Daphne believes Drew's life is full of joy and respect. Envying others, on the other hand, dehumanizes the human experience. Daphne believes Drew's fabricated image and never learns about Drew's vulnerabilities or kinder side. Despite being idolized, wealthy, and almost famous, Drew dies with a reputation as a mean girl that will outlive her. This novel is heavily reliant on perceptions and misperceptions. Aditya has another misconception. Daphne initially judges Aditya on social media based on his pictures and the content of his profiles. Aditya does not fit the physical description that Drew prefers. He has dark skin, is older, chubby, and nerdy. Daphne suspects him of being Drew's killer because he appears so dissimilar to her. Her assumptions are the result of her misconceptions about Aditya, based solely on his social media page. Weiner highlights how wrong people can be when they judge others solely on what is revealed on the internet, when Aditya turns out to be a kind and genuinely good person. People always keep more offline than what they share online. Aditya not only exemplifies this point, he also serves as Drew's post-mortem voice. Drew is brought back to life through his memories of her as a kind but flawed person, a loving but self-conscious woman. Aditya humanizes Drew and gives Daphne the chance to learn more about the Drew she would have liked to meet. Revenge and justice are important themes in these chapters. Some people find it difficult to feel sorry for Drew because of the cruelty she has inflicted. Weiner asks, did Drew deserve to be murdered because she was mean? Although Drew effectively and methodically destroyed Leela's life and the hopes her immigrant family had for her, Leela's obsession with vengeance is psychotic. Her cruelty surpasses Drew's. On the one hand, Drew is a stereotypical mean girl. She employs other girls to perform tasks that she would rather not perform herself, such as taking her SATs or breaking up with boys. Drew, on the other hand, is more complex. She has a soft side. People like Daphne and Leela project their own issues with self-esteem onto Drew. Leela was not required to jeopardize her academic future by taking Drew's SATs. Leela chose to defy the rules and take the fall because Drew's family is powerful and influential. Daphne's happy ending brings the novel to a close. Daphne learns to appreciate her body after surviving Leela's attack and saving her own life. Daphne might have died if she had been as thin as Leela and Drew. Daphne has finally accepted her physicality. She ignores her inner critic, the voice that tells her that men like Nick, who is both handsome and kind, aren't interested in girls like her. Nick demonstrates that he is a good person who is attracted to Daphne. Daphne accepts his attention, recognizing her ability to both give and receive love. She realizes that there are more serious issues at hand than her weight and appearance. In a life where one could be murdered, lose a parent, or face a lonely life, what's the problem with having a body that doesn't fit into a narrow and ideal society? Weiner emphasizes how social media can distort our priorities. Social media encourages people to prioritize appearance over all else, diverting attention away from genuine conflicts. Weiner suggests that character matters more than socially normalized images of beauty and happiness, through Daphne's journey from low self-esteem to a confident woman. Character analysis. Daphne. Daphne Berg is a part-time nanny and social media influencer. Despite being raised by two caring teachers, she internalized low self-esteem from her grandmother who shamed her childhood body. Daphne develops a toxic relationship with her larger-than-life body, which plagues her well into adulthood. Daphne's parents secure financial aid for her to attend the prestigious Lathrop School in 6th grade, where she meets Darcy and Drew. Darcy, like Daphne, is kind and a nerd. Drew is a well-known and wealthy socialite who captivates Daphne. Daphne and Drew form a friendship based on their ability to use one another for social clout or favors. Daphne eventually ends her relationship with Drew after she is set up with a man who isn't interested in her, revealing that Drew feels sorry for Daphne. Daphne discovers social media pages dedicated to body positivity away from Drew's influence. She enters this world and starts a crafts business, which becomes more profitable as her own body positivity posts go viral. But Daphne's self-assurance is fabricated for social media. In reality, she suffers from low self-esteem and body dysmorphia. She yearns for a man to fall in love with her. Daphne is once again seduced by the person she could have been at Drew's glamorous side when she tracks her down to invite her to her wedding. Following Drew's murder, Daphne learns to take genuine pride in her body. Drew had a lonely life with an unhappy family. She broke up with the one man who loved her to fulfill her socialite destiny. Drew's life and murder demonstrate to Daphne that she has had a good life all along. Daphne gives in to Nick's attraction and cares while maintaining her unconditional friendship with Darcy. Daphne is thoughtful, pragmatic, and intelligent. She discovers who murdered Drew, and in the process, learns to love herself and recognize the toxic fabrications of social media. Drew Kavanaugh is a glamorous socialite from a wealthy family. Drew is cruel to other girls, despite her beauty and charisma. She dupes girls into doing her dirty work, then sets up situations to humiliate those girls. The bridges she burns follow her throughout her life. Drew has few friends and many enemies as an adult. Drew is murdered in the first part of the novel, but her presence is felt throughout. Drew's death represents a turning point for the protagonist, Daphne. Drew's family secrets are revealed in her death, revealing that a lonely woman existed behind Drew's veneer of perfection. Drew isn't as bad as she appears, but she won't show her vulnerability. She chooses to advance her family's narrative of perfect wealth by agreeing to marry for money and fame. Drew's ambition conceals her true heart, but it is Drew's actions, not her intentions, that defines her legacy after death. Daphne draws a parallel between Drew and Daisy Buchanan from F. Scott Fitzgerald's classic novel The Great Gatsby. Daisy is lovely and charming, but her beauty conceals her malicious manipulation of social status. Jay Gatsby, who transformed his life to impress her and win her love, is betrayed by her. The comparison between Daisy and Drew is not flattering. It criticizes American capitalist beauty ideals. Drew does not have to work for her position, wealth, or respect. All doors are opened for Daisy as well. Despite having found a man who loves her for who she truly is, Drew, like Daisy, is lonely and lives a loveless life. Daisy's betrayals kill two characters in The Great Gatsby, both directly and indirectly. Daisy and Drew differ in that Drew suffers the consequences of her manipulations when Leela, a girl from her past whom she had wronged, murders her. Drew is a ghost who haunts Daphne in parts 2 and 3. Drew's murder eliminates the possibility of Drew and Daphne rekindling their friendship based on mutual respect. Daphne only meets Drew after his death. Drew's character serves as a foil to Daphne's. Her character also represents Weiner's message about the dangers of impersonation. Darcy is a supporting character. Daphne should expect the same level of loyalty and unconditional friendship from everyone in her life. Darcy is astute, kind, and determined to carve her path. Her friendship with Daphne stems from their time at Lathrop. Darcy is Daphne's cheerleader and tough love giver. Darcy warns Daphne against becoming friends with Drew and is always there for her when Drew disappoints her. Darcy and Daphne form a friendship based on mutual respect and love. Darcy represents the reality that Daphne deserves to be loved, even if she isn't aware of it. Darcy is also subjected to societal pressure to conform. Darcy dates women, but is afraid to tell her parents for fear of being shunned by their conservative culture. Darcy, despite being rational and intelligent, is yet another character who does not live in her truth. Nick. Daphne's love interest is Nick. At first, he is suspected of murdering Drew and lies about his identity. However, Nick demonstrates that he is a trustworthy and kind individual. He is still dealing with the traumas of his past. Nick's beloved mother had been murdered on Cape Cod, and the years since have been spent searching for a place to call home. Nick is Drew's half-brother, and his mother had an affair with Robert Kavanaugh. Robert is not a man Nick wishes to emulate or know. Instead, Nick's journey is about finding peace after losing his mother and himself. Nick and Daphne's relationship begins as a one-night stand in Cape Cod, but they decide to stay together after Nick saves Daphne from Leela. Daphne's ideal man is Nick. He is attractive, kind, and humble. To find love with Daphne, Nick teaches her to love her body and accept love from others. Leela. The novel's antagonist is Leela. It is revealed in the novel's final chapters that she murdered Drew. Drew has previously wronged Leela. Leela had taken Drew's SATs for her, and when it was discovered, Drew was able to carry on with her life while Leela was expelled from school. Leela's immigrant family puts pressure on her to succeed in America, and their relationship is irreparably damaged when Leela is expelled. Leela spends her adult life plotting her revenge on Drew, culminating in Drew's murder. Despite being wrong, Leela is the villain due to her lack of empathy and ability to kill. Leela also poses a threat to Daphne's life. Daphne's pride in her body is born with Leela's death. Drew is regarded as cruel and mean until Leela is revealed to be her murderer. Drew can be remembered with more fondness and sympathy now that Leela is the true villain. Leela also personifies the perils of social media. Leela disguised herself by changing her appearance and using social media to get closer to Daphne. She stalks Daphne online to gain access to Drew, and she continues to stalk Daphne to figure out how Daphne solves the murder. While social media can be a means of communication, Leela demonstrates that danger lurks. Themes: social media's negative and positive effects. The character's well-being is influenced by social media. Throughout the novel, it is used for both good and evil purposes. Daphne discovers a community of like-minded women who try to uplift themselves and one another by posting about body positivity. In some ways, social media saves Daphne. She turns to social media when she is at her lowest. Other plus-sized women who proudly display their bodies inspire her. These social media accounts were instrumental in giving her the confidence to end her relationship with Drew and begin her journey toward body acceptance. Daphne observes online how women reclaim bodies that they had hidden away and were shamed by society. Daphne connects with others who have similar experiences in the world, and she realizes she is not alone. Daphne was so used to being around skinny women like Drew that it never occurred to her that her body was not abnormal. Daphne is motivated to give back to the online community. Social media can be empowering because it doesn't matter who or what you are, you can express yourself and contribute. Daphne is forced to commit to the process of loving herself by transforming herself into a body positivity role model. Her presence on social media keeps her vocal and accountable. It also provides her with small but significant financial opportunities, as she develops her business and social media into potentially lucrative careers. However, social media has some risky side effects. Social media is more than just a place where people can form cohesive and supportive communities. It is also a place where people can manipulate one another to advance socially. Daphne is honest about her body on Instagram, but she is dishonest about how much she worries about her appearance. While she exudes confidence online, Daphne suffers from low self-esteem. This is an example of a larger problem with social media, a lack of authenticity. Daphne and Drew both use social media to create illusions of wealth, confidence, and happiness. Everything they do on social media is designed to project a polished image. Their fans, particularly their younger fans, grow up believing that the posts they see represent the pinnacle of happiness. This distorts people's perceptions of themselves and others. Nothing is as perfect as an Instagram-posed image, and social media cannot begin to reach the depths of human conflict and emotion. As a result, social media promotes positivity while creating a vortex of negativity. Self-love is an important component of happiness. Big Summer's characters struggle with low self-esteem. Daphne's inner conflicts are accentuated by her first-person narration. The other characters are also plagued by feelings of shame and longing. Darcy hides her sexuality from her family, Nick is haunted by his past traumas, and even Drew, who appears to have it all, suffers from loneliness and the knowledge that her friendships are mostly phony. Daphne's low self-esteem is one of her distinguishing characteristics. Her body and appearance issues influence how she moves through the world and interacts with others. Daphne's low self-esteem led her to fall under Drew's spell at school. Daphne believed she could feel beautiful and confident in the presence of Drew, even though Drew had a cruel streak. Daphne listens to the negative voices telling her she needs to prove herself to people like Drew, rather than her intuition that Drew is cruel. Daphne breaks free from this toxic relationship when she is 19 years old. However, this does not boost her self-esteem. The psychological damage caused by her childhood and adolescence is difficult to overcome. Drew's pity for Daphne remains with her, as does Daphne's grandmother's body shaming and food withholding. Daphne has learned self-hatred and is having difficulty changing her mindset. In this novel, self-esteem issues are cyclical, ever-present, and only overcome with time and hard work. Daphne's self-esteem issues have a direct impact on her life. As an adult, she is still concerned that others will see her as Drew did, pitiful, pathetic, sad, easily manipulated, and a sidekick. When Daphne first meets Nick, she is skeptical that someone so handsome and kind could like her. Daphne has accepted the notion that she is unlovable because of her shape, size, appearance, and socioeconomic status. People who have shamed Daphne in the past, such as Drew or men who refuse to date her, are dealing with their issues with self-esteem, which affects how they treat others. Rather than believing that people who treat her poorly are unworthy of her attention, Daphne considers their opinions and draws on her own experiences with cruel people. This makes it difficult for Daphne to meet new people and expose herself to the outside world. She eventually accepts Nick's care, but it takes her a long time to believe that he is attracted to her. This implies that Daphne has passed up many happy relationships. Weiner encourages her readers to gain confidence in themselves. As Daphne's journey demonstrates, love of self must come before love of others. What exactly is a friendship? Friendship is a major theme in Big Summer. Weiner's questions concern the formation of friendships and the definition of friendship. The central friendship under consideration is that of Daphne and Drew. Daphne and Drew, are they friends? Can you be friends with someone who takes advantage of you? Whether Daphne wants to believe it or not, she employs Drew in the same way that Drew employs her. Drew sends Daphne on errands and discards her when she becomes catty. When they reconnect as adults, Daphne discovers that Drew has contacted her to gain access to Daphne's social media followers. Daphne is disappointed and hurt by this. Daphne, on the other hand, employs Drew. Daphne is more confident in Drew's presence and enjoys Drew's glamorous lifestyle. Daphne is introduced to a wealthy world without rules through Drew. Daphne enjoys her excursions into the world of the privileged because she sees them as an escape from her less privileged life. Daphne accepts Drew's wedding invitation as an adult because she offers her money. As a result, Daphne isn't exactly a good friend to Drew. The distinction is in their intentions. Daphne genuinely wants to be a good friend to Drew because she understands the value of true friendship. But as a child, Daphne is so captivated by Drew that she is unable to reach Drew's heart. Daphne considers herself to be Drew's friend, but she is unaware of how damaged and unhappy Drew's home life is. Even as an adult, Daphne discovers layers to Drew she never knew existed. Both women keep certain aspects of their personalities hidden from one another. Their friendship appears to be doomed until we learn that Drew left Daphne money in her will. Drew would not have chosen Daphne to inherit money unless she genuinely loved her. Weiner uses their friendship to explore how friendships are formed and maintained. If their friendship appears to be based on exploiting one another, how would Drew and Daphne have been able to strengthen their bond? And even if they used each other, there must be a reason why they chose each other. Darcy and Daphne's friendship, on the other hand, is less complicated. Both women are smart, nerdy, passionate, and caring. They unconditionally love and support one another through life's ups and downs. Darcy is a much more devoted friend than Drew. The friendship of Daphne and Darcy is portrayed as a more natural pairing. The contrast between Drew and Daphne makes their friendship both interesting and fragile. Finally, Weiner encourages her readers to be open to all types of people while also believing in the kind of friendships they deserve. Friendships can save lives, but they can also end them. Symbols and motifs. Cape Cod. Cape Cod is associated with wealth and buried secrets. It is here that Robert has affairs that lead to the birth of secret children. It is also the location of Nick's mother's brutal murder. It is also the location of Drew's murder. The setting for a lot of pain is Cape Cod. Despite this, it is well known for its beauty. Cape Cod serves as both a setting and a motif for the intersection of darkness and beauty. Drew, for example, can be both beautiful and full of darkness at the same time. Daphne's home in New York is a long way from Cape Cod. Weiner allows Daphne to put distance between herself and the past dictated by Drew by setting the murder in Cape Cod. Instagram. Drew and Daphne both started their influencer careers on this social media platform. Daphne can use Instagram to build a community of women who support one another on their journey to body positivity. According to Daphne, it is a space that provides equality and the opportunity for marginalized voices to create culture. However, it is also a place where people like Daphne can invent identities and live inauthentically. Instagram embodies the benefits and drawbacks of social media. It makes Daphne feel better, but she isn't open about her low self-esteem. It is also a place where people can reconnect after a long time apart. Leela stalks Drew's friends on Instagram and discovers an opportunity in Daphne. Similarly, Daphne investigates the people she suspects of murdering Drew via Instagram. Social media connects us, but perhaps overly so. Weiner uses Instagram as a symbol for promoting balance in this novel. Clothing. Clothing in Big Summer represents socioeconomic status and beauty standards. Daphne is consumed by her clothing concerns. She is constantly looking for a more comfortable and flattering outfit, and she compares clothing to self-confidence and self-respect. She believes that if she could feel good in her clothes, she would be more equal to Drew. Plus-size clothing is more difficult to find, demonstrating how only thin women are rewarded with fashionable, comfortable clothing. The existence of a few plus-size brands demonstrates how society has made thinness the norm, and how people disregard larger bodies. This gives the impression that Daphne is abnormal due to her weight. Most people prefer Daphne to Drew in appearance. Drew's body, on the other hand, is held up as a desirable goal. Her clothing deals are more lucrative than Daphne's. Daphne is constantly concerned that she looks fat. Her quest to create a more inclusive fashion industry is an important part of her body positivity mission.